We'll just. Hey guys, welcome to the show. Sorry, I haven't showered in 3 days.
Welcome to the real life.
Welcome to the good life, man. Lifestyle. What was that song? Lifestyles of the rich and the famous.
Oh my God, yes.
They don't make music.
Lifestyles of the Instagram famous.
They don't make music like they used to.
No, they don't. No, they don't. Oh my God.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the show. Cassandra, I'm so happy I get to play with you today.
I'm so happy to be here, Sam. It's always a pleasure.
Something that I love so much about you is I feel like you and I have a lot of the same frames for life and how life works and, you know, hacking our way through this reality, reducing suffering and just allowing just shit to be easy, you know?
Amen. Amen to that. And I do agree. And it's so nice. It's so refreshing to speak to someone that has that frame because the conversation is automatically, in my opinion, more creative and constructive.
Where did this come from in you? Have you always been this way? Because I mean, you and I met 2 years ago, 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And so I've always known you as this person. So I'm curious to know, like, did you come out of, you know, the womb like this? Or did you go through some trials and tribulations to get yourself here?
I'd say maybe a little bit of both. Like, I think on some level, I had this deep knowing coming into this life to handle some of the trials and tribulations I experienced at a really young age. And then the other perspective would be that it developed as a coping mechanism, right? To those, I prefer to choose the story that like my soul came here with this knowledge and it was kind of like this gift I was able to have to navigate through some choppy waters, especially, you know, when I was really young, you know, we're talking like 3, 4, 5, really dealing with some intense things going on at home and having to kind of intellectually wrap my head around. I remember very distinctly at an early age having a lot of conversations with God about why he would put me in such an environment, right? And really wondering, so me and my mom had a really hard relationship growing up. And I often just felt like, which was really interesting because they tried for 5 years to have me. So you would think, oh my God, like I was this miracle baby gift, right? But my experience of that relationship was always just that I was like always ruining her life. Always like that it was like kind of like the rain cloud on her existence that I was around. And that we constantly were butting heads and there was nothing I could ever really do that would be good enough or that would make her happy. Or that would, you know, wasn't that typical, like, oh, baby, you're so perfect. Like, you know, it was very much like, I remember so many times just seeing my mom crying and being like, what did I do to deserve you as a daughter? You know, why do I, you know, do I have to deal with you, you know? And so I would cry all the time, like, and wonder why, like, why God, why did you like have me beam down here? And so I think I just at a point decided to myself that it had to be for a reason, that had to be. And so I guess that's part of me why I like to think, I think it was something my soul came in with because even at age 5, you know, when I was like in kindergarten trying to figure this stuff out, I always clung to that as like this must be for something. And then I know I've told this story before, but one of my earliest coping mechanisms were watching E! True Hollywood Stories. And I would watch these E! True Hollywood Stories at night while I was like crying myself to sleep in bed. And I loved them so much because It was like this story of this person who had really overcome these more adversity, in my little child opinion, that I was dealing with, right? Because they would deal with, I would see like drugs and, betrayal and deceit and like all this like crazy adult stuff, that I still hadn't like figured out yet. And then how they were able to really become this like strong, successful, influential person because of it, and therefore influence other people by saying, listen, like I became X, Y, and Z famous actor, actress, and now I'm like doing all these great things in the world. And I came from nothing and I didn't have support, and X, Y, and Z, all these like things happened to me along the way. So I just chose that was why. I chose that, okay, I believe that maybe I was given this so that I would have that story to share one day.
That's so powerful. The mother-daughter wounding and like that mother wounding is just so intense,
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yes.
It's interesting, I think like my mom and I have always had like a really solid relationship, but even like looking back to our relationship and some of the patterns that I picked up because I was trying to impress her, or I was trying to be who she wanted me to be. And, it was no fault of hers, but I was trying to constantly conform to the idea that she wanted me to be, and I don't think I am still that, but
Oh yeah.
there's so much weight there because we see ourselves in our mothers for sure. And then when there's that toxic relationship, it's like almost like a hit at the self, like, oh God, I never want to be like my mom. Like how many times have we heard that shit, right?
Yeah. And I think it's so interesting. There's that in psychology they talk about, right? It's like, which parent's love did you crave the most? Right. And it's usually the one that you didn't feel like you were getting.
Did you crave your mom's love the most?
Well, it's interesting because I always thought I craved my dad's, right? Because I was always a daddy's girl, right? But I guess, when you peel back the layers, when I look at how I behaved as a child, in so many ways, I tried a million times to try to figure out what I could do to get her love in all these different ways. And then I did get to a certain point where I did give up, where I did realize, when I was probably middle school, high school, but to a certain degree, I've realized even, somewhat recently, like in the past decade, I've caught myself in little ways that I still try dance on the eggshells and like do things. And it's just such a fascinating thing to really look at and see who did I feel like I had to become, right? And it was so interesting because I did a lot of healing work around this, obviously. And that's why I do what I do right now. And that's why, a lot of the people that I work with come with some sort of like parental wounding, right? And like you said, all of us have it, regardless if you had a super solid relationship with your parents. Like it's not necessarily because of them, right? It's because of how you interpreted it during your growing season of life, right? They could have just told you couldn't have ice cream after your baseball game, right? And your little kid brain made it mean this big thing. What doesn't mean they're a bad parent, right? But we all have these little like things that happen that at that stage of our development trigger a belief about ourselves, right? That triggers how we show up, right? Like I believe that to decrease conflict or to try to make someone like me, I had to not have an opinion, right? That was one of my primary things because whenever I had an opinion, like ish hit the fan at home.
Right.
And my best bet was to not have an opinion and to just kind of let whatever happen. And so it was so interesting because it used to drive me insane in my 20s about how indecisive I was. Like I could literally, and I was like, I don't self-identify as someone that's indecisive. I very much know what I want. But then it would like come to the scenario and I would be indecisive. I wouldn't be able, it would almost be like I couldn't get it out of my throat because I felt like I'd be in danger if I had an opinion.
Wow. That's huge. What would happen if you spoke your truth at home?
I would get screamed at. Sometimes I'd get stuff thrown at me. It would just cause the entire, like, it would ruin the whole day. Right. It would just cause chaos. Right. And so it was just, if my truth was against what she wanted,
The
right?
narrative.
Obviously,
Right.
yeah. Like if it was an agreement, then it'd be fine. But if it was against the narrative, it would cause all sorts of, fallout. And so I just started associating so much pain with that. And what a beautiful thing it is now, and it's still so interesting. I'm so much better at it now. But it's still so interesting, like even in my relationship now, like being really, like sometimes, like when now I state my opinions, but it is like there's a part of me sometimes that's a little weird where I'll be like, like we're just picking out a dining room table and chairs, right? And I'll be like, I really like this one from Westham, and he'll be like, okay, but I like the, he found one that he liked from Scandinavian Designs, and I'll be like, okay, you can get that if you want, and but he now knows how to read me so well.
Yeah.
And I'll just like it's almost like it's funny because it's not as probably as fluid as normal people are, but I still will hold firm, like, and I'll be like, no, like you can get that if you want, like it's fine, it's not horrible that, but my preference is this one, right? And it's like such a weird, thing. Luckily, I will say the fact that like it's been kind of a non-factor in my business. Yeah. Because I don't relate anything about my business to that in a weird way, if that makes any sense. So I'm totally very decisive when it comes to business stuff. And I'm very used to like being in command and the boss in that area. Yeah. Because I'm not worried about that. But when anything that like triggers like a personal relationship, like a close friendship or something like that, that's when I really have to like own those muscles more.
So the wounding is relational wounding. It's when it comes into like the interpersonal, interconnected space, because there's probably a piece of you that fears rejection or chaos, or that it's going to, be an intense situation where you're going to be deeply hurt. I loved how you said, I associate a lot of pain to that, because that's exactly what it is, right? We leverage so much of that. Yeah. When you stopped caring about getting your mom's love in high school, did things get better with your mom, or like what was the journey there?
I just became more me. Things got better outside of home. I really came into, I was in all these different clubs at school. I had a thriving social life. I had a lot of friends, boyfriend, life outside of things was better. So everything was fine. And then I think my relationship with my mom only really got better when I started really doing therapy. Yeah. And when I started doing work, and when I could forgive her, right? And I could really look at it for what it was. And now in my like kind of, 20-foot chair or whatever, looking back at it, I can really see her like as an innocent person that was doing the best she could with her own, like now knowing what I know now, it's like completely different to be able to look at that and being like, my mom has a ton of Scorpio in her chart. My mom is like, she feels really deeply. She's so emotional. And I have some of that in me too. Mine's more like Pisces version of that. But like now I can relate to her. I see her, when she was in high school and college, she was an artist. She had all this like creative energy that she never really got to use because it was unacceptable at that time, and where she was. Right. And I can really see her for like the person and all the challenges that she had to deal with. Right. And, how losing her dad at an early age affected her, and how the whole dynamic of, being someone that used to like go and work in New York City, and then all of a sudden was like a stay-at-home mom and lost herself, and then was just trying, like, now I get it. right? Being an adult and being able to see that perspective of all of it, I could see how that came up. And, I think of our parents' generation and our grandparents' generation and on and on and on. And I think of, how hard it must have been for them without these tools, right? When we ride our own emotional roller coasters and we got like tools on tools on tools on tools on tools, right? And we have friends that we can call and can be like, hey, Cass, like, go on a walk. Hey, Sam, go do some breath work. Hey, let's talk about this. Like, tell me what's the fear here, right? We have a whole different vocabulary to deal with this than that generation did. So once I was able to have the compassion, that's when I think things started shifting because I stopped taking everything so personal.
That's so great. Did you ever feel oftentimes women don't want to become more successful than their moms because they fear this disconnection? And so they would rather be disempowered than have disconnection. Did you experience any of that? Because obviously you're extremely successful in what you do and how you show up in the world. Did any of that interplay into your relationship with her?
No, because my mom was a stay-at-home mom. Mm-hmm. So, and not to like discredit that, I'm not a mom and I haven't had kids yet or anything like that. So I don't know what that journey is like, but she didn't ever have anything for me to compare it to career-wise. So that was that. But I definitely did feel that when I started out earning my father, that was an interesting thing. And I think it's true. It's like we have this, and I think I see this in my clients a lot too, but everyone has it, right? Where it's kind of why we think like the rich can get richer, right? And sometimes the poor stay poor. It's because the rich are surrounded by people, right? Where that's the norm, right? Like it's the norm to make 7 figures, or it's the norm to have a thriving business, or, all of this stuff. And when you do have a group around you, whether it's family or friends or town, whoever's in your town or something like that, where there is this kind of, this is what we all do. And this is like the level that we all live with. And, you're the first person to drive the fancy car. You're the first person to get like the bigger house. You're the first, people don't usually look at your bank statements unless you offer them. But like when people start noticing things about how you're living your life, or maybe you've gone on a few more vacations than everyone this year, right? It can create a disconnect. And I do think that's one of the things that's one of the growing pains, or what I would say, like one of those kind of upper limiting things, right? Yeah. That can kind of try to keep us down. That, again, it's like being conscious of it, right? And when you notice it and you call it out, that's why I'm such an advocate in my life, but also in like all the stuff I teach, to just kind of notice when you're feeling that block, right? Because oftentimes the first thing that occurs to you is not like, oh, I'm getting uncomfortable because I'm making more than my dad, right? The first thing that might occur to you is like, oh, I'm feeling like a little uncomfort in this new income bracket, right? I'm feeling like a little uncomfortable with how big that launch was, right? Why am I feeling uncomfortable? Why am I not just feeling pure joy and bliss and gratitude, right? And then we investigate that and we can say, okay, well, what about this makes me feel guilty or makes me feel weird, right? And then I'm like such a dork for like, and I feel like you're probably like this too, but I'm like such a dork for doing all that work, right? Like I like my investigative self-journalism. I'm like, because I firmly believe if you have a vision, or you have a goal, or you have, something you want to achieve, that you haven't done before, let's just use the income level thing, because we were talking about it, that the only reason you haven't done it is because there are those things that are kind of tripping you up energetically, right? Yeah. And the things that are tripping you up energetically are tripping you up in your actions for it. And so we need to like look at it and clear that, because that's really the only thing that's stopping you, but it can be a big thing if you don't pay attention to it.
Sometimes when you're in it, it's so hard to understand what it is.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? So I can remember years ago when I would get so stuck in a part that I wouldn't even acknowledge that there's another narrative because I was just so committed to my suffering back then.
Yeah.
So I know there's some listeners who are like, yo, that's me right now, which is totally cool. Let's honor that. But I'm curious to know, what's your process, Cassandra, for and like doing that inquiry and doing that investigation? It's like CSI self-inquiry, you know, like dun-dun-dun. I don't know. What's the CSI song? It's like, I don't know. I don't watch TV. Don't know anything.
I don't watch TV either. So I'm like, I'm so sad that I don't know. Like, I know CSI, but I really don't know that. Like,
if anyone knows the CSI song, like, can you DM me? Because
DM us to keep us up with pop culture.
Dude, I fail pop culture. People are like, you know, like Kim Kardashian. I'm like, who? Like, so I kind of know that one, but like, I literally know nothing about pop culture.
Oh, when I go to like some of my friends from college and like home, like parties and stuff like that, like gatherings, not like parties. We don't do parties anymore. We're too old, but like gatherings and like people try to play like those like pop trivia like board games that are so fun. I'm just like in the corner like eating guacamole and being like, I hope no one notices that I know nothing.
Oh my God, I'm right there with you. It's so bad. Like any trivia game.
Yeah.
You know, unless it's trivia about fucking crystals and angels, I'm out.
Yeah, exactly. Then I'm like star player. Let's talk about Atlantis.
We should create a game.
Oh my God, we should. The spiritual people
like,
need.
What are the properties of like an amethyst? Oh, I know.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Oh my God. Okay, new business idea.
There we go.
TBD. We'll discuss it off the air. So first and foremost, I have to say, I'm a huge advocate, obviously, of having a coach or a therapist or both, ideally, right? I always have at least one of the two, right? Sometimes both, because I do think that is the key to quantum leaps, right? I think I can leap so much faster with allowing someone to witness me and someone that knows how to ask those questions. It's like, you know, and I see that, obviously that's why I do what I do with my clients, is because I've seen how, you know, I've jumped like 10 years and 6 months through working with someone, right? After like years of, you know, flailing on my own. And I've noticed like it's so cool. You know, there were two of my clients recently had this moment that was like just one of those like super gratifying moments as a coach too, where we're like talking about their dreams and their visions and whatnot. And through some of my little detective work and also just through my intuition of being like, no, they're not saying it right. We actually got down to the fact that they had created this whole charade of a goal or charade of a dream, right? Because they were so scared to own the real dream, right? Because they were or they had so much shame or judgment or all of this stuff, right? Around what they really wanted, right? And so my first disclaimer is, I do think if you're really serious and you're really blocked right now, get help, right? You know, like whether, you know, it doesn't have to be me. You're welcome to check out my website if you vibe with me, but there's tons of beautiful people out there. You'll find someone that you vibe with, or get a therapist if that's your mojo. So that's first and foremost. Like
that's your mojo.
And that's your thing. Or do both. Like, I mean, I'm like all of it, all hands on deck. But for my own self-inquiry, I really do say, and I've acquired this over the years, but I think it's really important to be able to have brutally honest conversations with yourself, right? You need to be able to be safe with yourself to ask the tough things, right? Because if you can do that with yourself, it can help you move along the process so much farther, right? And sometimes it is something like, for that example of something like writing out like, what do I really want? Like, what do I really want to do? Or who do I really want to be? Or what dreams do I really want to have? Right. And you might have to free write journal that every day for a week. You might have to, and I really encourage people to like keep writing beyond when it's comfortable. Writing for me has been super helpful, and for a lot of my clients, if you really push those limits, right? You write when you don't want to write no more, because that's when you start getting really, really honest, right? You clear out all of your own BS, right? You're like, oh, I want to do this, I want to do this, and I want to make that, I want to do that. And then it's like, okay. And the other question I really love when it comes to stuff like that is, and decisions and stuff, is asking, what would I do in a vacuum? Right? What would I do in a vacuum? Because usually when you ask that question, you get to what you really want. You know, whether it's like, should I go to that party or should I stay home and take a bath? And you're like, no, I should go to the party, right? It's because you don't want to disappoint your friends. It's because you think you should be social. But when you're like, it's a vacuum, it's a video game. I love using this analogy for life. It's a video game. And it's like, in those video games are, yeah, like this, someone who plays video games is probably like, this doesn't happen. But when I remember playing like Zelda with my brother in like 3rd grade or whatever it was, the screen would pause back in the day, and they would be like, go into the enchanted forest or go into like the lovely lake or whatever, right? And then you pick one, right? No one else in the game is affected by your decision, really, right? You just pick one and then you do that thing. If we thought that way about our choices, we'd be a lot more honest with ourselves about what we want to do, instead of letting all the external input make our decisions for us. And then the same thing goes when you're looking at your fears, right? It's saying like, okay, you know, and I think this is something that I don't want to sets people apart in a way. When you can develop the skill, it truly can help you rise, I think, a lot faster in that way. Where, you know, oftentimes when people come to me and I'll ask them a question, like, let's say they'll tell me their income goal. I want to make $100,000 this year. Okay. And then I'll be like, okay, so tell me now why you don't want to make $100,000 this year. Right. And they'll be like, there's no reason. I obviously do. Right. And I'm like, but there are some reasons why you don't, which is why you're not. Right. And you need to get to the point where you can have that kind of honest conversation. And obviously I pry it out of them, we figure it out. But
I love it. So good.
But when it's with yourself, it's like, I do that with myself too, where I'm like, okay, let's say, I'm trying to think of a thing. Well, honestly, it was with my wedding, right? I had a lot of like noise going on around my wedding with everything that's going on in the world. And we're having an international wedding and it's going to be next fall. So who knows like what's going to go on or whatever. And I caught myself doing things to sabotage, right? Like I would randomly be like, maybe we should just elope. Or maybe we should just do it here, right? And like, thank God my partner would just like call me out on it every time and be like, what are you doing? Like,
he's like, no, bitch, we getting married.
Yeah, like, no. But I really asked myself, I was like, okay, so why don't I, right? And then I was able to look at, oh, well, I'm scared people are going to say this. I'm scared people are going to think this of me, right? I'm scared, that, all of it was like other people's judgment.
Well, thank God you weren't like, I'm scared he's not the one, because then we're like in a different conversation.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. Yeah, that's it. And that's why it's good to ask those questions too, right? In case it was that, right? You want to know that.
Curveball.
Right. But it's the same thing with like, when you look at, and then just going back to what we were saying, when a lot of people look at their income goals and their income goal exceeds their spouse or their partner, their parent, not their partner, spouse, partner, same kind of deal. Yeah. Their parent exceeds their social circle, right? It's like, it's so interesting that you don't realize how much that affects you. And if you can just look at it, like I had one of my clients wanted to be a millionaire and but also find the love of her life, right? Find a husband, right? And she was scared that if she became a millionaire before she found him, that it would be harder to find him, right?
Interesting.
because like men would be intimidated, like all of this, story she had around it, right? And so what I did, and I was like, okay, perfect. So now you're clear on what's preventing you, because that's a big one too. When you have anything that gets in the way of love, right? Oftentimes you will do whatever you have to do to like get love, whether that love's from your future husband, partner, spouse, or your family.
Yeah.
And so you need to clear that up. So I had her come up with a game plan. Be like, okay, so what is your game plan to triage that? Right? What kind of conversations do you need to have with prospective dates? What kind of men do you want to date that are going to be able to handle that? Right? What's the plan to, so we kind of came up with this game plan of both like what kind of man she's going to want to be with if that's where she's at, and how they're going to need to show up for her, and the kind of financial conversations she wanted to have. I made her like actually list out when like the timeline in which she would have these conversations in their relationship too, to the point where she felt like it was no longer a block.
That's awesome.
And literally, results not typical, 2 weeks later, she hit her $1 million mark.
That's incredible. Did she find the guy?
She's just starting to date now.
She's
like dating now.
So we like cleared the money block.
It was like almost like so fast, right? Because once she saw, it was as simple as having a game plan, right? And looking at it and being like, oh, right. And even to the point of being like, okay, well, these people don't need to know, like, here's what they need to know up front, right? And here's what they don't need to know right up front. And then here's what you'll tell someone when you're at a certain level of intimacy and whatnot. And just like, everyone's different with stuff like that. But it's like coming up with a plan that feels good to you, right? Awesome. Because once it feels good to you, then it's no longer a block and you're not going to sabotage yourself.
Money's like a great one because there's instant feedback with money in my experience.
Yeah.
I like playing with clearing blocks around money and seeing it come in just to reaffirm, not that I need any more confidence in the divine and the fact that I'm supported constantly, but it is like amazing feedback. I'm like, okay, I've been at this income level for X amount of months or years or whatever. All right, who do I get to be in order to have this income level? What's blocking me from that? And I love how you brought up, like when you said the thing about your dad, I was like, oh shit, like that's totally one for me. Like I can feel myself, like like I've got 2 amazing dads, and the thought of like, what do you call it? Like
earning.
Or out earning. There we go. Them feels like, that feels like edgy for me.
Yeah.
Because I've put them on like such a pedestal for, my whole life.
Of course. Same here. Yeah.
So it's cool to use money as that barrier or that boundary rather of like, okay, how can I notice this boundary that I have around money, and how can I how can I shift the block in order to receive more? And it's a great one. I find with love too. Like this woman's going to find this dude now.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, I have no doubt. And you're right. Logistically, I think sometimes that takes a little bit longer, and it hasn't been, so this is a very recent story. So that she hit her money. We've only been working together for 2 months. That's right. Awesome. And so that happened within the first month. And now we're focusing on like dating and, putting these practices into action as she is like out there in the field.
What makes a millionaire these days? This is such a tangent, but when you said that, is it like $1 million of income on a yearly basis, or like, I don't even know what makes a million.
This is a great thing too, because I think when you have goals, you have to define them, right? So for her, that was $1 million in the bank.
Got it. Okay, cool.
Right?
That's awesome.
Some people would define that as $1 million income. But again, that's why I think it's also first of all, I have no idea what the legal definition of $1 million is. I have no idea.
I was thinking, I'm like, I actually like don't know what that means anymore.
I have no idea.
It sounds cool, but I don't know.
Like, I don't know. So I always also ask, like, what's your definition? And I do think, when it comes to, and I'm sure, I know you do the same thing, so feel free to push back if you do it differently. But I do think when you're clearing blocks around something, it's important to get really specific. Like, so for me, it'll be like, if I want to make, let's say, $100,000 in sales, right? Versus I want an extra $100,000 in a certain portfolio or whatever, right? It's different. And there's a different energy, right? Versus, like you said, like a net worth goal or a yearly income goal. And so I think it's important, especially around money too, to find what excites you the most, right? Like what like for me, I'm like a money in the bank girl. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So I'm like,
I love you. I'm like a money in the bank. There's like a rap song, money in the bank. Show up. What was that song?
They're like, money in the bank.
I gotta find that song. I gotta find the other CSI song. I gotta find that song. Isn't it like money in the bank? Show them what you stink. I don't know.
Yeah, it's something like that. Oh my God, I haven't listened to that in forever, but now I want to like, I'm going to voice part of my morning ritual. Oh my God. Oh my God. As if my fiance didn't think I was already crazy. He's going to be like, okay, if this works, no.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that one though. I like, now that we're talking this one through, I'm like, oh yeah, because I've literally done $100,000 launch and spent $120,000 like in expenses. So it's like, okay, let's get specific. Like, how much money at the end of each year do I want in my account? Not in my business account, because I don't really count that as my money, but my personal account. Oh, that's funny. Money in the bank.
So I think, and that's why, it's for my process around really like releasing blocks and stuff is pretty extensive. I think when my in my program, that's pretty much, it's like 2 to 3 pretty like hefty modules on it. But it's because like I like to bring out all the tools, right? And I really I think different things respond better. Like I love EFT. I love clearing like the chakra energy blocks. I like doing little like inner child healing, bilateral stimulation. I like to like do the Ho'oponopono, right? Like all different things, like obviously all the manifesting stuff too, right? The embodiment of the opposite. But I find that at different points and stuff, I'm attracted to different things. And sometimes releasing something, it's like you kind of have to find, it's like when you're cooking, like depending on the dish, you're like finding a different pot, but they're all kind of pots to cook it, if that makes sense.
I love how, that's a great analogy. I love how, oh my gosh, Eric would not agree. He's always like, why are you using that pot for this? Like
my fiance thinks you could cook everything in one pot, and I'm like, no,
that's me. Him and I have a lot in common. I cooked bacon in like one of those massive things that you would like boil water in for corn,
like a stew.
Yeah, Eric's like, oh God. I'm like, wife in training. I'm like, I'm not a wife yet. I don't have to like have all the details, Eric.
Right. Give me some incentive.
So good. So what you are an embodiment of divine living. You're an embodiment of, figuring out what the result is that you desire in your life and how to truly manifest it. But you come at manifestation from in a multifaceted way. It's not just, staring at the mirror and saying affirmations. There's different elements to how you manifest, how you design, and how you create. And I think people miss the mark a lot with manifestation, because it's not narrow focus. It's not just about mindset work. In fact, like that's very limiting. So tell us a little bit about your program. Tell us a little bit about this philosophy and why you are just stand true behind this philosophy.
Yeah. And so I think some people feel like they're like bad manifestors. And I think that's part of why I wanted to create this process and just kind of, well, I've had it for a while, but like really like put it out there and really like spelled out, like easy to do, like here's like how you get through it. Because I was so sick of people being like, oh my God, you're just like such a magical manifester. And it's like, yes, I am, but anyone can be. I just approach it from a really holistic way. And kind of leave no stone unturned in a lot of ways. And so it's like, the way I see is like, what is more romantic and juicy and exciting than really living that like dream vision that you have for your life, right? I really see us as like, our life is a canvas and we are all artists, right? And we get to paint this life on our canvas, and we get to make it as beautiful and wonderful as we want. And the only thing that one of the biggest things that stops us is from like just realizing, one, that we have the canvas, two, that we have a paintbrush next to us and some paint, right? And we think that we just have to be at the reaction of everything. So so I give that like, that disclaimer, because the process is supposed to be fun, right? It's like a 12-step process, so it's extensive, but it's fun. And my students that do it like also find it very, very fun. Like, so we go through the, the theory about how like everything is in your life is divinely designed. Your desires are divinely designed. So that thing that like you're embarrassed to want is there for a reason, right? It was divinely planted there. So a lot of us have the like, but who am I to syndrome, right? And it's like, but who are you not to if it was a seed your soul came into this life to plant, right? Like, you're going against the divine plan if you don't allow yourself to sprout in that way. And then allowing yourself to have that vision from that level, right? Where we're fully allowing the wheels to come off, to break our own glass ceilings, and allow ourselves to dream like we used to dream when we were kids, so that we can actually get to the juice of where we're going. And that vision is like a magnet that leads us forward. And it's something that we can sit in, whether it is the specific vision or the general feeling of what life is going to feel like in that next level. I like to call it timeline hopping, right? Because I like, instead of manifesting, because manifesting to me feels a little bit more like, ooh, like I manifested $50, or I manifested a Starbucks, or I manifested a vacation even, right? But timeline hopping is we're literally like taking you from this one life trajectory and I'm moving you to a different life trajectory on a whole different plane, right? And so that's what like the whole process is to do, which is why it's so holistic, because we're not just manifesting one thing, we're manifesting a whole freaking life, right? And so looking at what is like 10 levels above, right, your life right now, like dream wise, right? If you like turn it up a notch, right, to like that. And then one of my favorite parts of the process is embodiment, right? Is really anchoring that in. So we look at, well, how does this life feel like? What does it look like? I literally make my clients start dressing as their future self right away. Right? This is like the most funnest thing to do as a woman too, as well. Right? Where I'm like, go to your closet right now and we're donating everything that makes you feel like old stuck you. And I want you to create a Pinterest board for what does new timeline you dress like? What kind of colors does she wear? How does she do her hair? How does she do her makeup? Right? And start getting some pieces together in that
So
sphere.
good.
So now you're showing up as her, you're literally dressing as her every day, right? You're asking yourself, I do this as well when it comes to the daily rituals and stuff. It's like, no, don't just like drink the green juice and do the meditation or whatever because you know it's good for you. Do it because that's what next level you does, right? And think about that. If next level you is like the CEO of this amazing company that you love in the career trajectory you love or whatever, and has amazing husband and kids or whatever your thing is, right? She probably needs to meditate and drink that green juice to feel sane, to be able to like handle what the day has ahead of her, right? She probably needs to take that bath at night to like like you think about, if I was living at that next level life, what kind of rituals would I need to hold that space? And then you start anchoring them in your reality now. You start doing that now. Right? And then we also think about that in terms of, your thoughts, right? Looking at your thoughts. Am I having the kind of thoughts, right? Could this level of me have these thoughts and still stay at that level, right? That's like, our thoughts are one of the trickiest things that try to yank us back to the old timeline, right? But if we honor them and we see them, we're like, oh, I like to say that's old paradigm, Cass, right?
Old.
Like,
So old school.
she is so sweet, but like that just we didn't take that with us actually, you know? And like going through that and really like clearing those out and being really conscious of then reprogramming with new counter thoughts, right? So when we have like that old paradigm thought, it instantly triggers this next level thought that we can then implement.
It's awesome.
Right. And so. There's like so much to them. I feel like I'll like talk to you for an hour if I explain all of it. But then like, so we do a lot of this implanting the new reality at the same time while we're excavating the old fears, right? So while we're like going through and doing all these different processes to really clear any of those blocks, clear any of what I call like those little T traumas, and where you said you were unworthy, or it's not safe to speak up, or, you know, who am I to do this, or I'm not good enough, right? Clearing all that. And so it's kind of like you're releasing all this stuff while implanting this new thing. And it really quantum leaps you. And you start feeling like a new person right away, right? And like you said, and then things start manifesting in your life little by little. And what you notice is then within a very short period of time, you're like 80% into the new timeline, right? And then there's just a few other little things that are catching up, like, you know, my client who it's like, okay, she's like mostly into her new timeline now, right? And there's maybe like 15, 20%, right? That now there is some element of like, obviously like divine timing and meeting someone and, you know, all of that. But you have creative control of so much. And so often I really believe that the divine is really just waiting for us to like wake up and start doing the work. So that is the program. The program is, you know, it's available for people who are really ready to, you know, start 2021 and say, you know, I'm going to rocket launch myself. I'm going to timeline hop. I'm going to really like take advantage of all this time. This year, especially 2020, has given us so much reflection time to really look at what's working in our life, what's not working in our life. We've had a lot of time at home and we've seen a lot of things shift in how our world works. And I think it's given people really that chance to hear their soul's calling, whether that's been like a loving voice or like an abrupt scream, right? Come on, stop ignoring me. Yeah. Right. And so this program really, it guides them through that whole process. And I'm super excited for it because I've been doing this work with clients for almost a decade now and have seen all these beautiful transformations. And I really refined it enough to this way where people are going to be able to do it at home, and there's, you know, homework and assignments, and they're really going to get to see these amazing results at home.
That's awesome. I love that. Where can people find that?
You can find it at my website, CassandraBodzak.com.
That's sweet.
And we'll also include a link below to, I'm going to do a free little mini course to get people, for any of you guys who have never taken a workshop or worked with me before and you want to see what my teaching style is like when I'm not just jamming with Sam here. You can check out that course. It'll kind of dive you into some of the principles and show you how you can start using them immediately to start seeing some changes.
I love that so much. You're the best. When are you coming down here? We're going to get matching tattoos.
Like we should do it in like the next week or two, I think.
I think so. I'm going to put it in my timeline because it's going to happen.
Yes. No. Yeah. I'm like seriously thinking I'm like the wrist I'm thinking. I don't know.
I mean, I got one on this wrist, so maybe I'll get one on this wrist.
Right. It'd be like little.
We discovered before we pressed record that we have a mutual love for triangles.
Right. And that we were both thinking about getting a triangle tattoo. Today.
Separately. It's meant to be. Well, thank you, my love.
Everything is divine.
The seed was planted. Now we got to execute, you know?
Right. Exactly.
Thank you so much for being on the show. I'm so grateful for you. You're just such a light. You're such a bright light. I'm so grateful for this conversation and for all you're bringing through the world. So thank you, darling.
Thank you for having me. I'm so grateful to be on the show. I just adore speaking with you, and
It's
I
so
can't
fun.
wait to see you in person
Yay!
again.
All right, to everyone listening, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode. Go ahead and take a screenshot. Let us know your favorite takeaway from this podcast. What's your handle? Let's tag you up.
At Cassandra Bodzak.
Cool. And then at Samantha Skelly. All right, everyone, we will catch you next week. Bye for now.
Bye.